Well, my guest is the former acting managing director of the Bank of Industry and founder of WVL Development Advisors Limited, Dr. Waheed Olagunju. He's live in the studio for this conversation. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Dr. Olagunju. It's been a while. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Right through. I saw you last at your old
office.
Old office. Well, this is a world-class facility.
Thank you so much, sir.
Given my 40-year twin-track career, we started in broadcasting 10 years. So when I see a good studio, I know.
Thank you so much, sir.
Congratulations to the management of TVC for this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It's really nice to have you. I think we should start with this NEPAD business group, understanding what this group stands for first, and what they really intend to achieve with this agenda.
You know, in the 60s and likely 70s, the major objective of the Organization of African Unity was the political liberation of Africa. Now, after the political liberation of African countries, we've attained independence, we now need to improve the living standards of our people. How do we deliver on the promises of independence? How do we deliver on the prosperity that we promised our people that democracy will deliver? So the OAU was transformed into the African Union, and the African Union now came up with Agenda 2063. This was launched in 2013. It's a 50-year economic master plan for Africa's development. That's why it's called Agenda 2063, 2013 to 2063. Now, in there are targets prescribed, right? For instance, our GDP is supposed to grow at now a revised rate of 8% for us to be able to ensure that African economies are able to take care of their inhabitants. With population on the continent today is about 1.4 billion, right? And the GDP is about 3.6 trillion. If you look at other comparable geographical locations, like China, with a population of, comparable population of 1.4 billion, and India with also 1.4 billion, you can see China doing a GDP of 18 trillion. And
dollars.
India, yes, please.
Wow.
And then India about 13 trillion. And you know, to arrive at the GDP, at the per capita income, you need to divide the GDP by the population. So clearly, when you have 1.4 billion Africans sharing a cake of $3.6 billion compared to other countries, those other countries have double-digit per capita income, while we are still struggling with single-digit per capita income. So for us to be able to bake a bigger cake for our own people, because there is correlation between the population growth rate and the GDP growth rate. The wider the positive gap between the GDP growth rate and population growth rate, the better. If, for instance, the population is growing at 3% and the economy is growing at 10%, so that 7% spread is to the favor of your citizen. So that's why you need to also watch the population growth, right? Developing our countries. So African leaders came up with this initiative, and this was launched, I think, in 2001 or so, and African Union came up with this, and NEPAD itself was also launched. There's the domestication process in African countries where the private sector, who are supposed to be the engine of growth, constitute themselves into national business groups. So in Nigeria, we have the NEPAD Nigeria Business Group. We have similar business groups in other African countries.
Okay.
Private sector must work in collaboration with the government and the public sector, because the private sector actually drives economic growth and development. Yes, governments come up with these development plans. Yes. But then you need private sector to implement most of them, particularly in the areas of investment. Governments provide the policy direction. Governments come up with the constitution. They come up with the laws, the policies, and the development plans. I'll give you a typical example. We have TVC here today because some 40 years ago, the Nigerian government hosted a conference at the ASCON in Badagry, where they discussed the deregulation of the Nigerian broadcasting industry. Prince Tony Momo was the Minister of Information at that time. The likes of Mangaji Dambata and co attended. I was also there. So that was where government took it into deregulate the sector. We only had NTA, we only had state stations, federal stations. Then the private sector came in. We have the dark communications channels and then TVC. That was the government policy. That's what I mean by that. The digital revolution that we have in Nigeria today is the most successful in the world. It's not highly celebrated, but we've been able to do so because of our population as well. The government in the mid-80s also had a conference on the desirability of Nigeria adopting digital technology. This took place at the Nitel Training School in Oshodi in 1986 or so, when Colonel Tanko Ayuba was Minister of Communications. Mana Ibrahim Ali was PAMSEC Communications. I was also at that event. So I'm able to follow those trajectory, policy. Now, the banking reforms is also traceable to the privatization and commercialization of the Nigerian economy. The same government, the Babangida administration, came up with the structural adjustment program to open up the Nigerian economy, privatization of the banks. Then the TCPC was set up, Technical Committee on Commercialization and Privatization and Commercialization, headed by late Dr. Hamza Zayad. And then Dr. Shamsuddin Usman was the pioneer director general. So that's when the banks were privatized, and then new banking licenses were also issued. The likes of Mr. Fala Diola, Tunel Melu, Jim Ovia, I said the Peter side, late Pascal Dozie. You can see what they've done. Yes. So these are policies. We used to import cement in those days too. But Obasanjo government came up with a cement policy in 2002 when Chief Kola Jawodu was Minister of Industries. By 2012, Nigeria became self-sufficient in cement. Now, we're in Nigeria today, where we boast of the largest refinery in the world, petroleum refinery, in the sense of having the longest train, because the Lagos State government, way back in 1999, came up with the free trade idea when the current president was governor of Lagos State. And successive governments of Lagos State followed through with that policy, with that program. Hence, Aliko Dangote keyed into it and came up with this. President Jonathan approved the refinery. It was commissioned by President Buhari, and another phase was commissioned by current President Tinubu. So what am I trying to say? Reforms take time to crystallize. And that's what we're trying to do also now too. So when AU came up with Agenda 2063, it's a 50-year trajectory. It therefore means that programs must be initiated, right, to drive the goals. How do we grow our GDP at 8% per annum every year? How do we ensure that Africa is able to bake a bigger cake comparable to what they are doing in China and India? It's only if we stop trading as 55 countries, if we integrate our economy, such that Africans don't have restrictions moving across borders. So that's the whole essence of the African Continental Free Trade Area, right? It promises to be able to raise 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty by 2035, over the next 10 years. If we increase trade amongst ourselves, we increase production. What do you trade in? It's better you trade in goods that we have to produce competitively, right? So we're trying to increase the productive capacity, to domesticate the productive capacity of African economies. The ECA came up with commodity-based industrialization strategy some years back, meaning that let your local resources be the backbone of your industrialization. If it's agriculture, for example, look at the value chain for agriculture, from primary production to value addition to secondary, moving from cassava. Cassava produces food and also produces industrial raw materials like ethanol. Yeah. You have gari, you have fufu. Yes. So you have the value chain, then you go into packaging and most of that. So agriculture is an area where it's a no-brainer. Industrialization must be driven by agriculture. Then we also have soil minerals. In Nigeria, about 44 of them have been identified in commercial quantity. Right? It's for us to add value. In fact, I always argue that the unemployment in Nigeria is artificial. Because if we are to apply ourselves fully to, for example, all the 3 segments of the production process, primary, secondary, and services, we take into account the raw materials we have in Nigeria, we will not have enough manpower to drive the Nigerian economy. In the 70s and 80s, when industry capitalization was about 70 to 80%, we had to import labor from other African countries to work in Nigerian breweries in Guinness and whatever. You know, so we can, if we get our act together and we face all those areas, and that is what the NEPAD Business Group is also saying. Yes, that's where I'm headed. Right? So the AU Agenda 2063, yes, those are all the elements African countries to key into all these areas.
Because I totally agree with you that the private sector has a role to play in this, which was also the theme of that event, mobilizing Africa's private sector for AFCA tours. But I don't know, on our own part as journalists, we think we are talking too very much about the AFCFTA. So what are those actions? What should we expect from this NEPAD? Maybe the summit, the group, you've come together, policy statements and all. What are those things that we should expect, decisive actions, and we start to see the positives? We want to see it.
Exactly. That was one thing we did. We brought in active participants in the AFCTA. I mean, there's a lady called Ms. Zezewa. She runs a company called Le Look. They produce bags. And she gave us practical experience, her own experience. She said the AFCTA is the greatest blessings for the African continent. But how many of us know about the AFCTA? How many of us know how it works? So we need to acquire knowledge. We need to go and read the AFCTA agreement, go and study the protocol as entrepreneurs before we know the opportunities and how to tap into the opportunities. And she gave practical examples, how she exported goods from Nigeria to Tanzania using the airline arrangement made by the Federal Ministry of Infrastructure and Investment under Dr. Jumoke Dowell, who worked with UNDP to negotiate with Uganda Air. And when they landed in Tanzania, they had challenges. Her team went to the AFCTA website where they complained instantly. And the solution, the matter was resolved within 2 hours. Wow. And at that conference, the lady from SON, Standard Organization of Nigeria, who is Nigeria's person, right, who works on that portal, confirmed that yes, she received that message. She contacted her counterpart in Tanzania. Who reached out to the Tanzanian customs, and the goods were resolved, the matters were resolved within 2 hours. So we had such practical people who gave us their own experience. Yes. So they are like case studies, right? So when you join NEPAD Business Group, or you associate with us, we have entrepreneurs who can hold you. We came up with about 11 sectorial groups, and many of them expressed interest to join those sectorial groups, and they are ready to hold other entrepreneurs to help them to navigate the AFCTA arena. So government was there, federal government, the head of NEPAD Nigeria was also there, Lagos State government was there, many other government officials were also there. So all the tiers of government were represented, the private sector, public sector, and then our international development partners, ECOWAS was there, as you saw. And then, of course, Nigeria's leading economic analyst, Bioda Adedipe, Professor Kenife, Muda Yusuf, all of them were there. And Adedipe, by the way, provided the secretarial services support for us, virtually free, you know, because it's also a convert. The daughter was also there. So they all believe in the FCTA. And we are trying to inform our people, because knowledge is the most important thing. Our people perish for lack of knowledge. So we are trying to let our people know the opportunities in the FCTA. And you can see what is happening to Alhaji Aliko Dangote now. Because of what he's able to do in Nigeria, other African governments are inviting him. Yes. He was in Ethiopia and recently he's in Zimbabwe. But the Nigerian government gave him the enabling environment. That's what I'm trying to say. And that took a while, you know, to get to where he is today. So we need to follow through our reforms. And that's why I'm also calling on fellow Nigerians now to ensure that the reforms that are being put in place now are actively supported. It will take a while for them to begin to crystallize. But then we're even getting preliminary results. Yes, as the stability in the economy, the exchange rate, the GDP growth rate, and some other indices. And of course, increasing confidence in the Nigerian economy. If you travel by air, you see a lot of foreigners traveling to Nigeria. Sure. Some can get the information from multinational media, but those who are wise will ignore what multinational media is saying, come to Nigeria, do their own fact-finding, and invest in Nigeria. This is the time for anybody who means well to come and take position in the Nigerian economy, using the FCT as well, because the African market is huge from Nigeria. But it also means that we have to be careful to ensure that we provide enabling environment for entrepreneurs to thrive, because others might go to neighboring countries and target the Nigerian market if we don't get our act together. Like we had Mr. Bayo Ogunlese the last time when he visited Mr. President. He said he had post operations in Benin Republic and Togo, but not in Nigeria. Not in Nigeria. But then he's having discussions with our president and to ensure that whatever is wrong here are fixed. To increase domestic investment and to ensure that more Nigerians invest in Nigeria. Good enough, Aliko has invested. Mr. Rabi is doing his best. Tony Blelu is investing. But then let's bring in Bayo Ogunlese as well, too. Yes. Let's bring in Akim Bello Asage as well. Yes. These are people that the president is talking to, and these are people who can catalyze investment into Nigeria.
So now, with the forum held with, what more should we expect? What's the next step?
The communique, solid documents, we're going to circulate this to relevant government officials. Good. And we are going to engage them. There are recommendations for the government at different levels, national and subnational government, because entrepreneurs don't exist in the air, they exist on the ground. And in most cases, the state government they deal with, right? They have an important role to play, federal government and state government, in providing the environment. So that's why I'm going to meet with federal government officials and state government officials. Then the private sector as well have important roles to play. We will be engaging more with the chambers of commerce, NASIMA, MAN, NASI, NASMA. They were all there as well too, right? And then our development partners like the African Finance Corporation, African Export-Import Bank, African Development Bank, right? Economic Commission for Africa, even EFCTA in Accra. And then, of course, the media. We need to pump out a lot of information to our people. Let them know what opportunities are. Let them know what the prospects are. Because there cannot be development without communication. Healthy communication. Like the president emphasized yesterday at the All Nigerian Editors Conference. We need to use communication constructively to catalyze development amongst our people. We need cohesion. Because without cohesion, without political stability, we can't have development. So we shouldn't pull down this country. We need to build the country together and make sure that confidence. Because the Western media, they doctor what they report about the outer society. They don't say all the negatives of it. When we go there, we see those things, but they don't report them. You don't see them in the headlines. But in our own country, we should ensure that the confidence of our people, right, is strengthened in the country. And that's where the foreign confidence will also come from, that we need the development process, particularly on the African continent.
Well, it's a good way to live it. It's an interesting conversation, but I just expect that Nigeria gets the best of the AfCFTA.
Oh, yes. We are very well positioned. That's why we are actively engaging the federal and state government officials. And then it has to be a whole of society approach.
Yes, yes.
Because it's not only government now. You and I will have important roles to play. The taxi driver, the Nigerian embassy official, how he attends to people who go there to ask for visas, how they are treated at the airports, right? How they are treated in the airlines. Investors begin to form their impressions, negative or positive. So we all have important roles to play.
Dr. Waheed Olagunju, we can spend the hour discussing this, but it's so interesting having you. Dr. Waheed Olagunju is former acting managing director, Bank of Industry, and the founder of and the CEO, WVL Development Advisors Limited. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best, and we'll do our best also to support NEPAD.
Thank you very much, Tolu. All right, it's a pleasure.
Yes,
thank you.
We'll take a break, and when we come